And Bob, every time I've gone out there, has a whole lot of stuff that he's been researching about the temple that he wants me to tell me about, all the stuff he's been finding out about the temple, because he has a vested interest in it too. And then over the years, I've gotten to know Pat Kraft. This has been a long, slow learning curve for me to find out all the people and get all the information and everybody I need to know to make the project happen. But Pat Kraft introduced me to 3D copying, and the drawings we got from Bob Bedent worked absolutely perfect in the machines at Portland Community College. And I have to tell you, it's very, very interesting, because we made one building to make sure that it worked right and that everything was going correctly. And then it was a fairly large size model. It's built about the size of the one out there on the table, the big one. And I said, yeah, this is exactly the way we would want it. And he said, and then Pat Kraft said, so what scale do you want these for your small model going to Israel? And I told him we want it to be that 1 foot equals 720 feet, which is almost a football field and a half. But anyway, that's the scale we were going to use. So he sat down and he did something to the computer keyboard. And then he started asking me, okay, how many of these buildings do you want? And I told him, and he put that number. And how many of these buildings? And he did all of this. And then he pushed start and said, come back in the morning, I'll have them for you. You see how precise these buildings are, and they're all done within 24 hours. At that time, Kriegel Publications called us and asked us if we would like to make a new edition for the book. They were trying to decide between 3 things. They'd already sold out 2 printings. They were trying to decide whether to do a 3rd printing or to just have the book go obsolete or do a revision to the book. And what did we feel about doing a revision to the book? So we decided, Carl and I decided to go ahead with the book revision, which meant to me that I was going to have to build a new big model, because there were a number of things in the old model that needed to be updated, especially after I've talked with rabbis for so long and understood a number of things that we as Christians in the United States don't get about temples, because we're here and they're there. And so I had a number of small things to correct, and the only way to do that is to build a new model. Well, it just so happened at that particular time that it was getting near the end of a semester at Portland Community College, and the machinery was all being used for students' projects, and we couldn't get to it. And I was trying to figure out, how are we going to build a new model? I'm running out of time. That's the only thing we got to get done with this book before it can be published, is to build a new model. And then I remembered another fellow who had called me a long, long time ago and sent me a number of emails from Germany. His name is Georg Hagedorn. Georg Hagedorn had called me because he had a group of craftsmen in Germany and Europe generally who were believers who wanted to use their crafts for the Lord, and had built several models of the tabernacle, and wanted to know if we had any use for building models of the temple. At that time, I didn't. But now I thought, well, I wonder if he's got acquaintance with anybody who's got a 3D copier. So I wrote him an email, and he sent me back, yes, he knew somebody. His name was Edwin Ripardi, who lives in the Netherlands. Well, I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, so I went back up and talked to Pat, and I said, Pat, is there any way that we could maybe work in some of the buildings, that we could do this, I know it's school, and he said, well, right now, the previous term has just ended and a new term is beginning. Could you come back and see me on Friday? Because the first week is really obnoxious for me. Just come back Friday afternoon. So I did. And lo and behold, sitting in Pat Kraft's office with him was Craig Castile. Unbeknownst to me, Pat Kraft had put my name on a list of possible projects that people could do, and that if they wanted to do one of these projects for an actual business or something here in Portland, that they could pick one of these projects. And Craig Castile picked ours. So we had half of the buildings for this done at PCC and the other half done in the Netherlands. At one point when Pat was out of the room, Craig turned to me and said, I've just become a follower of Jesus, and that's what lightened me to do this project. Now the temples are all done, the little one and the big one. The book is now produced. This little model will be going to the bookstore in Jerusalem in the middle of May. I will be going over to deliver it. There's a couple of verses I'd just like to read. I've read them earlier, but I want to focus on a couple of other things in them. In Ezekiel chapter 43, verses 10 and 11, it says this: Son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. Now, the first time I sat down with Rabbi Chaim Richman in Jerusalem, my friend Jimmy DeYoung was in Jerusalem at that time, and he had invited me over for dinner that evening after I'd met with the rabbi. When I got to his house, he said to me, John, I've been praying all afternoon for you and your meeting with the rabbi. And he said, I was reading through here in Ezekiel, and I saw it says, Son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. He said, John, I don't think a fair presentation of Ezekiel's temple has been made to Israel from the time of Ezekiel until you visited with that rabbi this afternoon. Now we are taking another step. Not only are we presenting it to rabbis, we are going to be presenting it to the whole of Israel. In the book of Zechariah, it says this, in chapter 12 and chapter 13. God is talking, and he said, And I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they have pierced. They will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for his firstborn. In that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. There's a day coming when Israel will recognize Jesus is their Messiah. Somehow, God has made a connection between the temple of Ezekiel and that day. Now, I can't say for certain that this model has any connection with it, but it does have the potential to be that. And I can say, based upon what God said in His Word, that there might not be any ABC, NBC, CBS, BBC cameras on hand when this model is delivered to that little bookstore. But it has more potential to change the Middle East than anything that is going to be on any of the stations throughout the world on the day that we deliver that. Because it will be pointing out to the entirety of Israel that Jesus is the Messiah, that here's their future. Jesus is the Lamb of God, who's the Lion of Judah. And this temple speaks loud and clear about that. And someday, they're going to accept that. They're going to believe Jesus. And Jesus will be here to reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and fulfill all the unfulfilled promises that are left in His Word to be fulfilled. That day is coming, and this model could be part of it.